The man with the boulder head. A couple years ago, I moved to a quiet domestic town just outside of a major US city. Based on the population, middle-aged parents with kids, and boring hobbies, I had always thought of it as a pretty safe place to live in. I'm an unemployed night owl, so I like to walk and ride my bike during the quiet late hours and sleep into the afternoon. But ever since I met the men in the red truck, I don't go out after dark. I was taking a stroll a couple months ago when I saw just the creamiest, biggest moon in the sky. I love the moon, and I love sharing the things I love. So I dashed inside to drag my roommate Dan and my friend Alexis out to see it. They stayed up late too, but it was past 4 a.m., so we were all damn tired. They enjoyed the full moon, and we agreed it was a nice capstone for a night well wasted. We were half a block from my apartment when a pickup truck rolled up to the curb just over my left shoulder. The street was half lit and empty, but for us. "Hey ladies, you're out late." The voice I heard wasn't flirty or playful, it was dead serious, almost like a little bit hateful, I thought. As the truck's red cap sidled into my periphery, I saw the guy's head leaning out the window, massive and stubbled and half whitened by the street lamp. The driver's face on the far side lit up orange as he dragged on a cigarette, then it went dark. I thought I could see his teeth gleam, like he was just barely smiling, but I wasn't sure. I'm a transgender woman, and at the time, men had just started hitting on me occasionally, but I already had the smiling, light-hearted rejection routine down pat. "Yep, just about to go to bed actually. We're all pretty tired," I said, forcing a laugh. The man retracted his boulder of a head into the truck and said, from the dark, "Come over here. I can't hear you." I repeated myself more loudly and chuckled again, a little frailer now. My friends went silent. "Just a couple feet closer, that's all. Don't be rude." He said it really slowly, as though he were exerting all his effort on trying to seem casual. It was at this moment that I became very frightened, because this was creepy as fuck, yes, but also because these men hadn't given a single glance to Dan. Dan, for context, is an aesthetic bodybuilder. He's big and hairy, with starkly toned arms, long black hair, and a caveman's beard. From behind at night, he could conceivably be mistaken for a woman, but from the front, he's not the sort of guy people mess with. So, from the man's hateful tone and the way he wanted me closer, my lizard brain surmised something. These men want to hurt us or take us with them or both. From the fact that they hadn't even sized up my massive roommate in preparation for a struggle, I surmised something else. These men are armed. Heart fleeing my body, I went into escape mode. I said something, I don't even remember what, to brush off the man's request, while maintaining a semblance of harmless ditziness. I took a step back, giving Alexis and Dan the glare of death, and started walking slowly. Immediately, this guy's tone was a staccato plaint. "Come on, hey. Do you guys know where we can get some booze this late?" "Nah, sorry man." "Well, do you guys like weed? We've got some joints in the car if you want them. Come on, come over to the window." "Nah, we all stopped smoking years ago, but thanks." As we passed the neighbor's hedge and the apartment complex slid into view, I realized we had 3 options, none of them good. 1, we could run to the front door and hope they don't pull out guns, and then live in constant fear because they'll know exactly where we live. 2, we could turn down the side street, hope they give up, and use the apartment's secluded back entrance, the risk of which was obvious. If they don't give up, they have us off the main road in the dark. Or 3, we could walk on to the next block, avoid them finding out where we live, and then lose our rush inside and lock the door contingency. I chose option 2 completely at random. As we neared the street corner, I heard the driver's voice, desperate and impossibly deep. Do you like donuts? There's a Dunkin' Donuts around the corner, we'll buy you some. Just hop in. It'll only take 5 minutes. We kept walking. The truck lurched forward to catch up and then halted. They rolled up the windows, and I heard them arguing inside as we rounded the corner onto the secluded side street. The truck lurched again, then screeched to a stop, lurched, then stopped. I heard a muffled shout, and then they were quiet. As we approached the back of the complex, I could hear the engine humming behind me. If we turned right, they know where we live. If we kept walking, we would lose our chance at safety. We slowed our pace to a crawl. Dan and Alexis, who hadn't said a word, were looking at me bug-eyed and sweating. And then tires screeched, and the truck was gone. We sprinted into the parking lot and locked the glass door, all of us shaking. Then the foyer door, then my unit. We collapsed in the dark. I hissed at Dan as he instinctively moved to flip the lights on. We shut the blinds and called the cops. We told them what happened, gave descriptions. They got annoyed when we didn't want to give them our address for an immediate in-person interview. We were all really shaken already, and cops are terrifying. So we hung up. The three of us haven't talked about it since. I shut the blinds now, and I scold Dan when he leaves his window unlocked. I crouch around my room sometimes, leering at that tree outside my window, with the vodka nips in its upper limbs. I walk in the daytime now, and I miss the moon. It can't be true. I am a new user to Reddit, but an avid user of the site. I have favorites and hates on the site, but one has caused me to move for my home. I will not release details on where I previously lived, but I'll never forget the day I met the smiling man. You may say it's a copy, but it's all too real. I read the story the first time I visited the site about a year ago. It frightened me, but I was a disbeliever like most and went on. I live in the city, but was taking a break in my parents' log cabin. The seclusion and feeling of being alone by itself made me nervous. We had guns but never used them, never had a reason to. I was watching TV when the motion sensor lights went off between 1 and 2 a.m. I paused the movie and froze in fear. I began making my way to the window with a camera in case it was deer, peering my head up just enough to see a man doing a weird dance. He was moving slowly and not heading in my direction. I thought he was drunk, but why in the middle of the woods? I went out the back patio door. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. The light wasn't powerful, but I could see him. Not clearly, but he was definitely there. I turned to pick up the flashlight behind me for a better view. When I turned back, he was staring at me. He had a dumb-looking grin on his face, with his eyes wide, almost delusional. I almost panicked, but stayed frozen. What do you want? I questioned, scared out of my wits. I slowly went into the cabin, my eyes glued on him. Once I locked the door, I darted to get the gun off the cabinet, and the light seeping in through the window in the living room shut off with a blank. I stared down the hall towards the couches, and began moving slowly with the gun at the ready. I glanced at the window to see a figure silhouetted by the full moon, just standing there. I pointed the gun at him, trying to scare the man, but he just remained with his head still tilted upwards. I backed towards the front door slowly with my keys, and turned and ran towards my car. I got in easily, and started up, but who do you think was blocking the driveway? To my luck, he turned and danced his way up the street. I pulled the car in gear and began driving away, when I noticed him sprinting towards the car. I have never pushed the gas pedal farther in my life, speeding in the opposite direction and terrified if I didn't stop, I would be done. And I didn't stop, till I was pulled over on the main road. I was detained for going 40 over the limit. I have yet to go back to that cabin. Backcountry creepiness. This seems like it might be a good place to share this. I haven't really told anyone about it yet. I'm an avid backpacker, and 2 weekends ago, I took my boyfriend on his first backpacking trip. We did a short one night out and back in Colorado's Front Range. He's an asthmatic, so I decided to keep it short and light, until I knew how strong of a hiker he was. The trail we took started from Echo Lake Park, which for those unfamiliar with the area, receives a couple hundred visitors each weekend, quite busy by backcountry standards. The particular trail we were on, Chicago Lakes Trail, is quite a popular day hike, but we decided to make it an overnighter. After about 2 hours or so of hiking, we reached the lower Chicago Lake. We ran into a group of 8 20-somethings who were planning to camp at the lake and chatted them up for a bit before continuing to Upper Chicago Lake. The upper lake is about a half-mile past and 300 feet higher than the lower lake, with lovely views overlooking the lower lake. Upon arriving, we were the only ones there, along with 3 30-something men, and, despite the exposure to high winds, decided it would be a good place to set up camp. We got a late start to the day, so by the time camp was all set up, it was about 6 p.m., and the sun had settled behind the mountains. The last of the day hikers had since left, and we were the only tent up at the upper lake. It was getting pretty windy and chilly, so we decided to retire to the tent for the night. We ate dinner overlooking the lower lake from our tent, and then zipped ourselves in. Note: with the rainfly covering my tent, there was no way to see outside of it. We stayed up for a bit longer before dozing off. At some point later, who knows how much later, I was awoken by what I thought were heavy winds. But after listening for a bit, I decided something alive was out there. Maybe a pika, maybe a ground squirrel, maybe a bear. I woke Alex up because I was a little nervous. After listening for a bit, he agreed the rustling was definitely something other than the wind. We kept as quiet as possible, hoping not to spook it just in case it did turn out to be something larger and stronger than us. We both located and unsheathed our knives without really consulting the other. I guess we were both a little nervous at this point. And then he saw it, oriented towards the left side of the tent from where we were laying, and he put his hand over my mouth to tell me to keep hushed and pointed to it. Lo and behold, there was the shadow of a human silhouette being cast upon our tent. It was a full moon night, so it was practically bright as day outside, so bright that you could walk around Sand's headlight no problem. I think this is what allowed the shadow to be created. Anyways, we both stayed as quiet as possible, desperately trying not to alert whoever the hell was outside of our tent that we were awake, knives pointed in his or her direction. We stayed as still for what seemed like an eternity, which is probably closer to 2 minutes, staring at the shadow as the wind came and went in bursts. Finally, he or she moved, and a hand touched the tent. No, I don't mean a hand grazed our tent. This person reached their hand out and put enough pressure on the tent to the point that the rain flying depressed into the tent, and you could see the outline of the hand on the tent. And then, after about 10 seconds, the hand was no longer on our tent. The shadow retreated, and we heard some rustling, then not a damn thing, other than the wind for the rest of the night. Needless to say, we didn't get a wink of sleep. We didn't even make a peep for an hour or so after the incident. Alex practically suffocated me because he was insistent on covering me with most of his body so he could protect me if he or she came back. Around 7 a.m., we finally emerged from the tent. There were 0 signs of other campers, but there was one thing. About 2 feet from our tent was a big lighter. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't Alex's, and we were pretty damn sure that neither of us saw it the evening before. If we had, one of us would have surely picked it up because, leave no trace and all. We packed up camp just as the first day hikers and trail runners were making their way up to the lake. By the time we got back down to the lower lake, the group we encountered the previous afternoon had already packed up and moved on too. So yep, that's my story. I don't really have a clever ending to tie it all together, but I can't say this. It is an uniquely terrifying experience being 5+ miles from the trailhead and many, many more miles from civilization when something like this happens. I think I would have driven myself mad if Alex hadn't been there with me that night. But Despite our little experience, he has assured me he'll let me take him backpacking again. Probably not those legs though.